In the previous episode, we witnessed Operation Vengeance, a surgical strike, precise to the minute, that decapitated the leadership of the Japanese combined fleet. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto lay dead in the jungles of Bougainville. But like all major events in war, Yamamoto's death was not an ending. It was merely the beginning of two other stories, two enduring legacies, one a tragedy of fanaticism, and the other a bitter battle for glory. As Yamamoto's Betty slammed into the earth, another Betty, carrying Vice-Admiral Matome Ugaki, was plummeting into the sea. Ugaki survived. And as the American pilots returned, a question immediately arose amidst the cheers of victory. In the chaotic blur of that lightning-fast dogfight, who actually pulled the trigger that killed Yamamoto? This is the story of The Survivor and The Fight for Credit. Part 1. The Tragedy of Matome Ugaki, the last kamikaze flight. The Betty bomber, tail number 326, carrying Vice-Admiral Ugaki, did not explode in midair. It slammed into the ocean surface at terrifying speed. Of the 11 men on board, only 3 survived: the pilot, a staff officer, and Ugaki himself. Ugaki was gravely injured, a broken wrist, broken ribs, and nearly drowned, but he was pulled from the water. Surviving while his beloved commander perished seemed to leave a deep psychological scar on Ugaki. He felt he had failed in his duty to protect Yamamoto. That survivor's guilt, combined with an extreme interpretation of the Bushido Code, would define the rest of his life. After months of recovery, Ugaki did not retreat to the background. He was promoted and returned to the fight, holding various key command positions. By February 1945, when the war situation had become desperate for Japan, Ugaki was appointed commander of the 5th Air Fleet, based in Kyushu. This was the era of the divine wind, the kamikaze. Ugaki became one of the most fervent supporters and commanders of suicide tactics. From his base, he dispatched thousands of young pilots on one-way trips to crash into Allied fleets, particularly during the bloody Battle of Okinawa. Ugaki recorded every thought in a detailed diary known as Sensoroku, or war record. The diary reveals a man obsessed with death, honor, and ultimate sacrifice for the emperor. And then, the final tragedy arrived. Part 2, August 15th, 1945. Narrator. Noon, August 15th, 1945. Across Japan, citizens gathered around radios to hear a voice they had never heard directly, the voice of Emperor Hirohito. In the historic Jewel Voice broadcast, or Gyokuon Hoso, the emperor announced the acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, Japan's unconditional surrender. The war was over. Narrator. For most, it was the end of the horror, but for Matome Ugaki, it was an unacceptable humiliation. He could not live with defeat. Immediately after the emperor's broadcast, defying clear orders to cease all hostilities, Ugaki made his final decision. He announced to his staff that he would personally lead a squadron of 11 Judy, or Yokosuka D-4Y dive bombers, on a final kamikaze mission targeting the American fleet at Okinawa. He told his subordinates, "I am responsible for the deaths of thousands of my pilots. Now I will go to join them." He removed his rank insignia, donned a dark green uniform, not the ceremonial white of the Kamikaze, and carried the short sword that Admiral Yamamoto had once gifted him. The final radio message from Ugaki's plane was recorded around 1924 that evening. He reported that he was diving onto an American ship. Then, silence. Matome Ugaki, the man who miraculously survived the ambush of Yamamoto, had chosen his own death. He became one of the last, if not the last, kamikaze warriors of World War II, dying hours after the war had officially ended. His fate stands as a tragic symbol of the fanaticism of a dying era. Part 3. War in the Fog. Lanphier versus Barber. While Ugaki's fate was a tragedy of blind loyalty, on the other side of the Pacific, another story was simmering, beginning the very moment the P-38 touched down at Henderson Field. Who shot Yamamoto? When Lieutenant Thomas Lanphier landed, he jumped out of his cockpit and shouted, "I got Yamamoto." Lanphier was a talented pilot, charismatic, articulate, and from an influential family. His combat report was dramatic. He claimed to have engaged Yamamoto's Betty, watched it perform a tight, almost impossible turn, and then shot the tail section off, sending it crashing down. But another pilot in the kill group, Lieutenant Rex T. Barber, told a different story, one less dramatic, but highly detailed. Barber, a quieter man, reported that he had approached the lead Betty, Yamamoto's, from the rear and left, firing continuously into the right engine and fuselage. He saw the engine smoke, then catch fire, and the plane rolled over and crashed into the jungle. He insisted that the Betty never made any sharp turn. In the euphoria of victory, and because Lanphier was the first and loudest to speak, the Navy, who ran the operation, initially credited Thomas Lanphier. The glory was his. But there was a problem. There was only one Yamamoto plane, and the accounts of the two men were contradictory. Part 4. 60 years of searching for the truth. The controversy should have been buried, but Rex Barber never abandoned his story. For decades, the two men lobbied, wrote letters, and gathered witnesses to prove their claims. It became one of the most famous aerial credit disputes in history. The Lanphier camp claimed that Barber only damaged the Betty, and Lanphier delivered the coup de grace. The Barber camp claimed Lanphier was mistaken. Barber believed he shot down Yamamoto, while Lanphier likely attacked the second Betty, Ugaki's, or an escorting Zero. U.S. Air Force investigations were conducted over the decades. In 1972, an inquiry attempted to appease both men by awarding them half credit each. This decision satisfied no one. But then, technology and new evidence emerged. First, historians and former P-38 pilots analyzed the aerodynamics of the P-38 and the Betty. They concluded that the sharp turn Lanphier described was physically impossible for a G-4M bomber flying that low to the ground. Second, the most critical evidence came from Japan. The surviving Zero escort pilots from the battle described the moment. They stated that Yamamoto's Betty was attacked from the rear, caught fire in the right engine, and crashed straight down, perfectly matching Rex Barber's account. Third, expeditions to the crash site in Bougainville analyzed bullet holes and the angle of impact, indicating the plane was attacked from behind, not from the side in a turn. By the 1990s and early 2000s, although the Air Force never officially reversed the half-credit decision, The consensus among military historians was nearly unanimous. Rex Barber was the man who shot down Admiral Yamamoto. Thomas Lanphier, who died in 1987, took his claim to the grave. Rex Barber, who died in 2001, also passed away without ever receiving the full, official, and sole recognition he sought. Conclusion. Operation Vengeance was a brilliant military success, but its legacy, like the war itself, was profoundly complex. It left behind the tragic story of Matome Ugaki, a warrior who could not find a way to live in peace, who chose death in accordance with the Bushido spirit he believed in. And it left a 60-year controversy between Barber and Lanphier, a stark reminder that even in the clearest victories, the fog of war always obscures the absolute truth. Glory may be shared, but the memory of that moment belongs forever to the individuals alone.